That's right, get him out. The words cracked across the marble lobby like a whip. They didn't sound like hotel policy. They sounded like judgment loud, deliberate, and meant to sting. Behind the polished front desk, a blonde clerk leaned forward, smiling just enough to let everyone know this was personal. Her finger jabbed the air toward a tall black man in a gray overcoat. Two uniformed officers flanked him, each gripping an arm as if escorting a criminal. The chandelier above glittered like an indifferent jury. The lobby fell silent. Guests clutched handbags, paused mid-check-in, or tilted phones just slightly to record. No one spoke, but the air buzzed with the unspoken. He doesn't belong here. The man's name was Derrick Coleman. He didn't resist. His hands stayed free, his posture upright, his expression unreadable. Calm. Too calm for someone being marched out of one of the most expensive hotels in the city. That calm was its own statement and its own trap. One of the officers muttered, "Sir, we're giving you 20 minutes to clear out." The clerk's smirk widened. 20 minutes? He won't last too. Laughter flickered at the edges of her voice, sharp enough for the guests nearest to flinch. But Derrick didn't flinch. He moved only his eyes, scanning the lobby, the gilded mirrors, the velvet armchairs, the towering vase of lilies in the center table. This was supposed to be his inspection tour unannounced, unseen. Instead, it had become a spectacle. From the far corner, a teenage boy whispered to his mother, "Why are they dragging him out?" The mother tugged him back, shushing softly. Near the elevators, a concierge in training froze, her eyes darting from Derrick to the glowing reservation screen she'd glimpsed earlier. His name was right there, but fear kept her silent. The clerk's voice rang out again, higher, mocking. "Luxury suites aren't for your kind. This is a 5-star establishment, not a shelter." The sentence landed like shattered glass across the room. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. Someone else muttered, "That's too much." But no one intervened. Derrick's gaze finally lowered to the marble beneath his shoes. For a moment, it seemed he might accept the humiliation, let them escort him into the street like a trespasser. But then his jaw set, subtle but unyielding. He spoke for the first time, his voice even, measured, not raised. "You have 20 minutes. The words puzzled the officers. The clerk frowned, uncertain whether he was pleading or threatening. But Derrick wasn't speaking to them. His tone wasn't defensive. It was declarative, as if time itself had just been put on notice. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here." Now, back to Derrick. The lobby held its breath. Phones lifted higher. The next 20 minutes would decide everything. Derrick Coleman hadn't chosen this lobby by chance. He had built it. Every marble tile, every chandelier, every stitched seam of the velvet armchairs carried the weight of contracts he had signed, loans he had repaid, investors he had convinced. But none of that mattered to the staff watching him now. To them, he was just another intruder in a gray overcoat. That morning, Derrick had walked into the hotel alone. No entourage, no briefcase lined with embossed initials, no designer watch flashing under the lights, just dark slacks, a navy turtleneck, a wool coat. He carried himself like a man with purpose, not privilege deliberately ordinary. That was his test, because Derrick wasn't here as a guest. He was here as an owner. And owners, he believed, should see their empire the way the world saw it, stripped of introductions, stripped of recognition, stripped of protective titles. He wanted to know how his staff treated the unknown, the unassuming, the man who didn't fit their image of a 5-star guest. So he booked the suite under his real name. No alias, no warning. He wanted authenticity, even if it cut deep. Now it was cutting. The manager's words still echoed, "People like you don't belong in this lobby." It wasn't the first time Derrick had heard that sentiment dressed up as policy. He remembered 20 years earlier, a night in Chicago. He was 22, wearing the only suit he owned, trying to check into a budget hotel after his first real estate closing. The clerk glanced at his ID, then at him, and said, "This can't be you." They made him wait outside in the rain until he found a friend to vouch for him. Humiliation became fuel. Tonight, in a hotel he owned, the same fire burned in new clothes. Around him, guests whispered. Some pulled out phones, uncertain if this was spectacle or scandal. A young couple near the fireplace shifted uncomfortably, the woman mouthing, "This isn't right." At the check-in desk, a trainee clerk stared at her monitor. She had seen his name on the screen not 10 minutes earlier. Coleman, penthouse, owner level. But her lips pressed tight. Speaking up could cost her job. Silence felt safer. Derrick's silence was different. It wasn't fear, it was strategy. He let the officers guide him a few steps, his shoes clicking softly against the polished floor. Each step was measured, steady. Guests saw a man being pushed out. Derrick knew he was measuring the room, memorizing faces, cataloging every slight. The head clerk leaned to a colleague, whispering loudly enough for Derrick to hear. They try this all the time. Fake cards, fake names, think we won't check. Her laughter was thin, brittle, echoing too far in the vaulted lobby. Derrick's eyes didn't rise. He spoke only once more, calm and exact. You think you're escorting me out? You're escorting yourselves. The words hung in the air, confusing some, chilling others. The trainee clerk froze. A businessman near the bar lowered his phone, suddenly curious. Derrick adjusted his coat, unshaken. He was still the quiet man in plain clothes. But beneath the surface, the countdown had already begun. The marble lobby should have been quiet, the hush of money at rest. Instead, it rattled with mockery. As Derrick stood calm between two officers, the desk clerk leaned further over the counter, her voice sharp enough to slice the stillness. Don't waste their time, sir. Guests who belong here don't walk in off the street with stories and fake cards. She didn't whisper. She projected. Every guest within earshot turned their head. A few raised eyebrows. A middle-aged man near the concierge desk scoffed under his breath. A woman clutching a designer tote shifted away, as though distance might protect her from association. The manager arrived then, striding across the lobby with the practiced arrogance of someone who thought authority equaled truth. His nameplate gleamed. Richard Hale, General Manager. He stopped just short of Derrick, lips tight, eyes narrowing with contempt. This establishment has standards, Richard declared, voice pitched for the audience rather than the accused. And people like you, he paused, letting the words land heavy. Don't meet them. A ripple moved through the guests. The cruelty wasn't veiled anymore. It was public, deliberate. The young trainee clerk stiffened, hands frozen over the keyboard, her eyes darting to Derrick's reservation still glowing green on her screen. But her voice stayed locked in her throat. Richard plucked the folded reservation slip from the desk. Without looking twice, he tore it clean in half, then dropped the pieces into a silver trash bin by the counter. There, he said flatly. No record of you ever being here. Problem solved. The clerk laughed lightly, a brittle sound. One officer tightened his grip on Derrick's arm. The other officer muttered, Lobby's clear, boss. We'll have him outside in 2. Ends. From a leather armchair near the fireplace, a young woman spoke up suddenly, her voice trembling but clear. He showed ID. I saw it. Heads turned. Richard snapped back instantly. Stay out of this. He's wasting everyone's time. The woman sat back, silenced. Phones continued to rise, little red dots of recording lights blooming across the room. Guests weren't sure yet what they were capturing, but they sensed something wrong enough to matter. Richard gestured sharply to the officers. Escort him out. Now. The officers began moving Derrick toward the glass doors. His shoes tapped steady against the marble, unhurried. His silence pressed heavier than shouting could have. And then, as if to punctuate the humiliation, the desk clerk called after him, Enjoy the sidewalk. That's where you belong. Gasps scattered through the lobby not because the insult was shocking, but because it was said so openly. The line between policy and prejudice had vanished. Derrick stopped. Just one step before the doors, he straightened his coat sleeve, his face unreadable. Then he said, calm, precise, You've already left this lobby. You just don't know it yet. The officers exchanged glances. Richard frowned, unsure if he had just been threatened or judged. The guests leaned in, sensing that silence had shifted again, no longer resignation, but resolve. The countdown was ticking louder now, even if only Derrick could hear it. The glass doors loomed just ahead, polished so perfectly they reflected Derrick's face back at him. To anyone else, it might have looked like defeat, a man being walked out of a hotel he couldn't afford. But to Derrick, the reflection wasn't shame, it was strategy. He didn't pull away from the officers, he didn't plead with Richard or the clerk. His silence unnerved them more than resistance ever could. Every measured step he took across the marble floor seemed to echo louder than the manager's insults. "Sir, you can make this easier on yourself," one officer said, his tone halfway between duty and discomfort. Derrick didn't answer. His eyes traced the chandelier above, the lilies in the center vase, the mahogany trim as if cataloging every detail of a space that already belonged to him. The clerk smirked at his quiet. "See? Nothing to say. That's what I thought." Her words darted across the lobby like arrows, meant to pierce, meant to leave scars. But Derrick's stillness was a shield. In the corner, the trainee clerk's fingers hovered above the keyboard. She could still see it. Coleman, penthouse suite, owner-level clearance. It glowed defiantly on her screen, truth hiding in plain sight. But fear pressed her lips shut. Richard's presence was too heavy, his wrath too certain. Guests shuffled in uneasy silence. A businessman at the bar whispered, "Why isn't he fighting back?" His companion answered, "Maybe he can't." Their words floated across the room, swallowed by the quiet power Derrick radiated without speaking. He remembered another night, years ago Atlanta, 24 years old, walking into a boutique hotel after midnight. He wore sweatpants, exhausted from travel, and still they told him, "This lobby is for paying guests only." He had the reservation, he had the card, but he lacked their permission. That night, silence cut him. Tonight, silence was his weapon. The officers slowed near the doors. One of them hesitated, glancing at Richard. "You want us to hold him outside until backup arrives?" Richard waved impatiently. "Just get him out. He's wasting time. That should be for real clients." Derrick adjusted his sleeve. The gesture was so slight, so deliberate, it felt ceremonial. He didn't look at Richard. He didn't look at the clerk. He simply let the silence stretch, long enough for every guest to feel it tighten around them. Then, in a voice calm as polished steel, he said, "Noise is temporary. Truth is permanent." The words landed soft, but the room stiffened. A woman holding her phone whispered, "Did you hear that?" Another man muttered, "He's not scared." Richard scoffed, louder than necessary, trying to reclaim the air. "Permanent? The only permanent thing here is that you're banned. Now move." Derrick didn't argue. He didn't need to. His silence was no longer compliance. It was the pause before an earthquake. The lobby had become a stage, and silence the curtain. Every move, every word, or the lack of them, was being watched. From near the fireplace, a teenage boy raised his phone, the red record light glowing like a quiet siren. "Mom, people need to see this," he whispered. His mother tried to lower his hand, but the camera stayed up. Across the marble floor, another guest, a woman in her 30s with sharp eyes, tapped her screen, starting a live stream. "We're at the Grand Meridian right now," she murmured to her followers, "and they're dragging a man out for no reason." Richard noticed the glow of phones and snapped, "Turn those off. This is private property." But the command rang hollow. The very word private felt laughable in a room full of witnesses. Behind the desk, the trainee clerk's hands shook. Her monitor still displayed the truth. Coleman, penthouse suite, owner level. She wanted to shout it, to push back against Richard's performance. Instead, she glanced at Derrick, calm, silent, waiting, and for a heartbeat she felt the weight of complicity pressing down on her chest. Two businessmen near the bar exchanged words in hushed tones. "This doesn't look good," one muttered. "Maybe he forged something," the other replied. "Then why not just verify it?" the first shot back. Their eyes shifted uneasily toward Richard, who was now pacing like a man trying to outrun the truth. The desk clerk, emboldened by her manager's energy, chimed in again. "Folks, don't be fooled. This happens all the time. People walk in with fake IDs, fake names. It's protocol to remove them." But her voice trembled just enough to betray her. Guests weren't buying it. Near the entrance, a concierge whispered to a bellhop, "That's Derrick Coleman. I've seen his face before. I think he's someone important." The bellhop's eyes widened, but fear kept his lips sealed. The officers kept their grip, but even they felt the shift. One leaned close to Derrick and muttered, almost apologetic, "Sir, if this is a mistake, you can clear it up later. Right now, we're just doing what they asked." Derrick didn't respond. He tilted his head slightly, catching the reflection of raised phones in the glass doors ahead. He didn't need the world to see a spectacle. He needed the room to hear itself. And the room was starting to. A guest near the elevator spoke up, voice firm. "Why hasn't anyone run his name? Isn't that the simplest thing?" Heads nodded. Whispers grew louder. The tension was no longer between Derrick and the staff, it was between truth and theater. The trainee clerk finally swallowed hard, her voice cracking as she spoke to Richard. His name is in the system. I saw it. Ugh. The words dropped like a stone into water. Ripples spread instantly. Phones tilted higher, capturing Richard's face as it flushed. The desk clerk hissed. Quiet. You don't know what you saw. But it was too late. The first crack had formed in the wall of silence. Derrick hadn't moved. He didn't need to. His calm was no longer just unsettling. It was contagious. The lobby wasn't just watching anymore. It was listening. The silence cracked when Richard's palm slammed the counter. The sound ricocheted across the lobby like a gavel. Enough, he barked. His face was crimson now, but not from control, from losing it. You are not a guest. You are not welcome here. And if you don't leave this instant, you'll be removed like the fraud you are. Gasps rippled through the room. The word fraud hung in the air like smoke, choking everyone who heard it. The teenage boy with the phone whispered, "He just called him a fraud on camera." His mother tugged at his sleeve but didn't tell him to stop recording. The desk clerk folded her arms, emboldened by her manager's rage. "You heard him," she said loudly. "This isn't a shelter. People like you come in with stories and think you can demand luxury service." Her voice sharpened on the phrase, "people like you." A couple near the bar exchanged horrified looks. Derrick didn't speak. He didn't even blink. His eyes locked on Richard, calm, steady, patient, like a man watching a storm waste itself against stone. The trainee clerk's voice trembled. "Sir, I told you, his name is—" Richard cut her off with a glare sharp enough to slice. "One more word and you're finished. Do you understand?" The girl shrank back, eyes glistening, her truth smothered by fear. From the corner, a middle-aged woman clutching a small suitcase raised her phone higher. "This is unacceptable," she said out loud. "You didn't even check his documents. You just assumed." Richard turned on her with venom. "Ma'am, if you don't like how we maintain security, you are free to check out and take your complaints elsewhere." The arrogance was palpable. Guests shifted, some whispering, some filming. The line between staff and aggressor had blurred completely. One officer muttered under his breath, "This is getting out of hand." His partner nudged him to stay quiet, but the unease was visible now even in their posture. Richard wasn't finished. He leaned closer to Derrick, his voice dropping into a sneer meant only for him but loud enough for the phones to catch. "You thought you could walk in here and pretend to belong? Look at yourself. Do you really think anyone believes you can afford this place?" The words were a blade, and he twisted them slowly. Guests stiffened. The cruelty wasn't about money anymore. It was about erasure. Still, Derrick didn't rise. He adjusted the cuff of his sleeve, the smallest motion carrying the weight of inevitability. His calm was louder than Richard's fury. The desk clerk slammed the reservation drawer shut. "No record, no booking, no guest. You're nothing here." The lobby went colder. Phones tilted, eyes widened, the atmosphere less like a hotel and more like a courtroom mid-trial. But the verdict hadn't been spoken yet. Derrick exhaled once, slow, deliberate. His silence was no longer absence. It was defiance. And the room full of witnesses, full of recordings, could feel it. The words, "You're nothing here," were still vibrating in the air when Richard snatched the torn reservation slip from the trash. With a flourish meant for the crowd, he shredded the remaining pieces and let them scatter across the marble like confetti at a funeral. "There," he said, his voice thick with triumph. "Nothing left. No proof. No guest." The clerk laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that cut into the silence. "Guess that's settled," she added. "Security, finish this." The officers moved in closer. One reached for Derrick's coat lapel. The other placed a hand firmly on his arm. Gasps broke out among the guests. Phones tilted higher, the red dots multiplying like watchful eyes. "This is unnecessary," one officer muttered, but Richard barked over him. "Remove him, now." The young trainee clerk, her voice breaking, tried again. "Sir, his name is still in the system. It says—" Richard slammed his hand on the desk so hard the sound cracked like a gunshot. "Quiet. One more word and you're out too." The girl froze, tears brimming, her truth locked behind fear. Then came the insult that stripped away any pretense of professionalism. The desk clerk leaned forward, her smile razor-thin, and hissed, "Sidewalk's waiting. That's where you people belong." A collective gasp swept through the lobby. The cruelty wasn't coded anymore. It was naked, weaponized, undeniable. Guests recoiled. One man muttered, She didn't just say that, but she had, and the phones had caught it. The officer tugged Derrick toward the door. His shoes scraped lightly against the marble, the sound too soft for the violence it represented. He didn't resist. He didn't twist away. He simply walked shoulders straight, head high, calm as if this humiliation were just another entry in a long ledger. Near the fireplace, the teenage boy whispered to his phone, "They're dragging him out. He hasn't even raised his voice." His live stream comments exploded in real time. "This is insane. Sue them. Don't stop recording." Richard turned toward the guests, spreading his hands as if conducting an orchestra of silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. This establishment takes fraud seriously. The situation is under control." But it wasn't under control. The more he spoke, the more the lobby shifted against him. Faces hardened, eyes narrowed, phones stayed raised. At the desk, the clerk made the final move. She picked up Derrick's black credit card, held it high for everyone to see, and sneered. "Looks fancy, doesn't it? Shame it's worthless." With a snap of her wrist, she dropped it into the steel trash bin beside her, the sound a metallic thud that echoed louder than words. The humiliation was complete. Paper torn, card discarded, body escorted, and still, Derrick did not react. He adjusted his sleeve once more, as if brushing away dust that wasn't there. His silence was unbearable now, heavy enough to make even the officers glance at each other uneasily. He spoke only 5 words, low, steady, precise. "You've already written your ending." Richard frowned, confused. The clerk smirked, unbothered. The officers hesitated. But the guests felt it. Something irreversible had just shifted. The countdown had reached its loudest tick. The echo of the metal bin still lingered when Derrick's hand slipped into his coat pocket. Not fast, not defensive, measured. He drew out a phone as black and polished as obsidian. No one stopped him. No one dared. The officers released their grip just enough to watch. One thumbprint, one silent swipe. The screen glowed. He raised it to his ear. His voice was steady, quiet, yet carried across the lobby like a low drumbeat. "Activate the protocol, 20 minutes. On the other end, a woman's voice answered instantly. Crisp, professional, certain. "Understood, Mr. Coleman. System logging now." Richard blinked. "Protocol? What protocol?" His voice was tight, tinged with sudden unease. The clerk snorted nervously. "He's bluffing, just trying to scare us." But the guests weren't convinced. The boy with the phone whispered, "He just said Mr. Coleman." "Did you hear that?" His live stream comments surged. "He sounds like he runs this place." "Wait, Coleman? Like the hotel group?" Derrick didn't explain. He didn't need to. He lowered the phone, letting it hang at his side, the quiet authority of his words filling the space left by Richard's bluster. The trainee clerk leaned forward, her courage flickering. "Sir, I know that name. Coleman. It's on the corporate." Richard snapped his fingers sharply, cutting her off. "Not another word." His tone cracked. No longer command, but desperation. Guests shifted, murmurs spreading. The balance in the room was tilting, and everyone could feel it. The officers exchanged a look. One finally asked, "Mr. Coleman, what exactly is this protocol?" Derrick's gaze met his, calm, unwavering. The kind that doesn't need volume, just time. A woman near the bar whispered to her husband, "I think he's somebody important, really important." Her husband frowned, already pulling out his phone to search the name. His eyes widened, and he muttered, "Oh my God." Richard tried to laugh, but it came out brittle. "Important? He's nothing. A scam artist with a phone call. That's all." Yet his eyes betrayed him, darting toward the clerk, toward the doors, toward the watching crowd that no longer seemed on his side. Derrick slipped the phone back into his coat pocket. The gesture was simple, final, as though a verdict had already been written. He adjusted his sleeve, then clasped his hands loosely before him, posture regal in its stillness. "I told you," he said evenly, "you had 20 minutes. The words carried weight beyond their syllables. Guests felt it. Staff felt it. Even the officers straightened, suddenly aware they might not be escorting a trespasser at all. Somewhere deep in the building, a chime sounded faint but distinct, like a system unlocking. A few heads turned instinctively, as if the walls themselves were listening. Richard forced another smile, but his voice betrayed him. "You don't scare me." But the truth was already written across his face. Derrick didn't need to scare him. He just needed the clock. And the clock was already ticking. The hush in the lobby deepened, like the room itself had drawn a breath. Guests leaned forward in their seats, phones tilted higher, capturing every frame. Derrick took one slow step back into the center of the lobby. The officers, uncertain now, loosened their hold. His coat settled neatly at his sides. He didn't look at Richard or the smirking clerk. He looked at the crowd, the witnesses, the cameras, the silent jury. "For the last 10 minutes," he began, his voice measured, resonant, "you've been told a story that I don't belong here, that I am a fraud, that I am nothing." His eyes swept the lobby. No one moved. Even the chandeliers seemed to listen. "But here is the truth." He reached into his coat pocket again, retrieving the same phone. With a single tap, he placed it on speaker. A woman's voice, sharp and professional, filled the air. "Mr. Coleman, board verification complete. You are cleared to proceed." Murmurs erupted. Guests glanced at each other, confused. One man near the elevator whispered, "Board? As in, board of directors?" Derrick let the silence stretch just long enough for the tension to bite. Then he spoke, his words deliberate, final. "My name is Derrick Coleman. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Coleman Hospitality Group. This lobby, this building, this brand, all of it belongs to me." The words detonated like thunder. Gasps broke across the marble. Phones jerked upward to catch Richard's face, frozen mid-smirk. The clerk's lips parted, her voice caught somewhere between a laugh and a cry. The officers stepped back instantly, hands falling away from Derrick's arms. The teenage boy filming shouted into his stream, "He owns it! He owns the whole place!" His comments exploded. "No way! This is wild! Respect! I knew it!" The trainee clerk covered her mouth, eyes wide. She whispered, almost reverent, "Owner-level clearance. It was real." Richard staggered, color draining from his face. That's not possible. You're lying." But the words rang hollow. The truth was standing right in front of him, calm, undeniable, unstoppable. Derrick didn't argue. He didn't need to. He gestured once toward the waiting crowd of guests and phones. "Ask them if I'm lying. Ask the system. Ask the board. Ask the staff who entered my name into your records this very morning." The woman live streaming near the bar turned her phone toward herself, voice trembling with exhilaration. "We are watching the CEO of this hotel group being dragged out of his own building, and he just revealed it on record. Every whisper, every gasp, every recording now bent toward a single point, the truth." Derrick clasped his hands calmly in front of him. His eyes met Richard's, not with rage, not with volume, but with the steady weight of inevitability. "You wanted me gone," Derrick said softly. "But it's you who no longer belong here." The line cut through the lobby like a verdict. The jury had heard it. The cameras had captured it. The judgment was sealed. And Richard Hale, once so loud, so certain, had no words left. The lobby erupted, not with applause at first, but with noise-shocked gasps. Whispers turned into shouts, the frantic clicking of messages being typed into live streams. The room had stopped being a hotel lobby. It was a courtroom, a theater, a broadcast studio, and the verdict was in. The clerk who had mocked him shrank behind the counter, her smirk dissolving into panic. He can't be serious," she stammered, her voice suddenly small. She reached for the reservation system, typing furiously, but the words "owner-level clearance" glared back at her like a spotlight. Her face drained of color. Richard's collapse was worse. The proud, red-faced general manager who had torn paper in triumph now stood rigid, his lips trembling, eyes darting around the room as though an exit might materialize. The authority he had wielded seconds earlier evaporated like mist under a sun he couldn't escape. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. The silence mocked him. The officers stepped back fully, palms lifted in a subtle gesture of retreat. One cleared his throat. "Mr. Coleman, sir, we weren't aware." His voice trailed off, awkward, deferential now. The shift was visible, undeniable. From the guests, the tide turned. The teenage boy by the fireplace shouted, "He owns it, I told you." His live stream comment feed exploded. "Bro, this is insane. Justice in real time." Hotel staff about to lose their jobs. A middle-aged woman clapped once, sharp and deliberate, breaking the tension. Another guest joined, then another, until the sound of applause rippled unevenly through the lobby. Phones caught every angle. Derrick, calm and composed, standing like a pillar in the storm. Richard, white-knuckled and shrinking. The clerk, pale and trembling. The trainee clerk, tears still brimming, whispered aloud for everyone to hear, "It was true. I saw his name this morning." She turned toward Derrick with a look that was equal parts apology and awe. The woman at the bar, still live streaming, declared, "You're watching history right now. The CEO just revealed himself, and the entire staff tried to throw him out. This is going everywhere." Her comments spiked. "Clip this. Share immediately. This man is legendary." Richard staggered forward, attempting one last grasp at control. "Everyone calm down. This doesn't change." His voice cracked. He looked at Derrick, then at the circle of witnesses. He knew. It had already changed. The clerk covered her face with her hands. "What have we done?" she whispered. Derrick hadn't raised his voice once. He didn't need to. His presence filled the space more completely than any shout could. The shift was complete. Power had crossed the floor, leaving the staff naked in their own arrogance, leaving the crowd unified in truth. And in the middle of it all, Derrick stood still, his silence louder than thunder. The applause ebbed into a heavy silence, all eyes fixed on Derrick. He let it stretch not for show, but for gravity. Every second made the staff squirm deeper into their own guilt. Then, with the calm precision of a surgeon, Derrick drew his phone again. One tap, one call. He placed it on speaker for the entire lobby to hear. "Nia," he said, his voice steady, "log the incident. Terminate the following immediately. Richard Hale, General Manager. Claire Adams, Front Desk Clerk. Effective this moment." A crisp voice answered instantly. "Confirmed, Mr. Coleman. Credentials revoked. Access terminated." Richard blinked, his face going pale. You can't." A vibration buzzed from his pocket. He pulled out his staff badge. The red light blinked once, then flatlined. Access denied. His phone chimed a system alert. "Your employee credentials have been deactivated." The clerk gasped, fumbling with her key card. She swiped it across the desk terminal. Nothing. The screen flashed. Unauthorized. Her hands shook violently. "You don't understand," she stammered, eyes wide with panic. "I was just following—" Derrick cut her off with a glance sharp as glass. "You weren't following policy. You were following prejudice. And in this company, that ends here." Guests erupted, some clapping, some shouting, phones capturing every angle. The teenage boy laughed into his stream. "They just got fired live. Oh my God, this is unreal." Comments exploded. Justice served. "That's power without yelling. Clip this forever." Richard staggered forward, desperate. "You can't humiliate us like this. Not in front of—" Derrick's voice sliced through his protest. "You humiliated yourselves. I'm only removing the mask." He didn't raise his tone. He didn't need to. The room was his microphone. The trainee clerk stood frozen, hand over her mouth. Then, trembling, she spoke. "It's true. I saw everything. I stayed silent. I'm sorry." Derrick's gaze softened, just slightly. Silence under pressure is fear. But silence in power is choice. Remember that. Richard turned, pleading with the officers. "Stop this. Do something." But the officers had already stepped back, their hands folded respectfully. One of them shook his head. "This isn't our jurisdiction anymore, sir. This is his house." The house roared with approval. Guests applauded openly now, voices rising. The verdict delivered. Derrick ended the call, slid the phone back into his coat, and looked at the trembling staff one final time. "You thought you were gatekeepers, but the gates were never yours." Richard's shoulders collapsed. Claire covered her face. The humiliation was irreversible, permanent, sealed not by Derrick's anger but by his authority. And the lobby, once hostile, now stood united behind the truth, a truth broadcast, recorded, undeniable. The lobby had shifted from a battlefield to a cathedral. Every guest stood witness, their phones raised not as weapons but as torches. The air was charged heavy with the knowledge that they had just seen something that would echo far beyond these walls. Richard and Claire stood hollowed behind the desk, their badges lifeless, their power gone. The trainee clerk kept her eyes low, shame and relief wrestling in her chest. The officers lingered at the edge, no longer enforcers but spectators, their authority dwarfed. Derrick stepped forward, his footsteps steady, deliberate. He paused at the very center of the marble floor, beneath the chandelier, where every eye converged. "You dragged me toward these doors," he said quietly, his voice carrying farther than any shout. "But you never opened them, because deep down you knew the truth. I don't walk out of my house. I decide who stays inside." The words cut through the lobby, clean and final. Gasps rippled, then silence followed. A silence not of fear, but of reverence. He turned slowly, scanning the faces around him. Tonight, you all witnessed what prejudice looks like when it puts on a uniform of policy. You also witnessed what dignity looks like when it refuses to bow. Phones trembled in people's hands. Guests nodded. Some wiped their eyes. The teenage boy whispered to his stream. He didn't even raise his voice. Comments exploded. This is history. Goosebumps. True power is quiet. Derrick adjusted his cuff one last time, then continued, his tone calm, deliberate, eternal. You mistook silence for weakness. That was your final mistake. Silence, in truth, is not surrender. It is patience. It is discipline. And when the moment comes, silence speaks louder than noise ever could. The line landed like thunder in still air. Guests erupted applause, breaking through, shouts of yes, echoing off marble. The energy was electric, collective, unstoppable. Richard bowed his head, defeated. Claire sobbed quietly into her hands. The staff who had stayed silent now stared at Derrick with a mix of awe and fear, realizing the world would never see them the same way again. Derrick let the sound swell, then raised a hand. The room quieted instantly. His final words fell like the closing gavel of a trial. I don't need a camera to prove what happened here. I am the result of it. Remember that. He turned, not toward the doors that had almost become his exit, but back into the heart of the lobby. The crowd parted instinctively, reverently. And as Derrick walked deeper into the hotel he owned, every phone still recording, every guest still whispering, one truth blazed brighter than the chandeliers overhead. Justice hadn't shouted. Justice hadn't begged. Justice had simply stood, unshaken, and prevailed.